Blackhawks fans. Welcome into Season 6, Episode 6 of the Four Feathers Podcast. A very Hawkey Halloween to all of you. We're coming to you live on Halloween Eve. It's Johnny Nani alongside Ron Luce, talking some Blackhawks hockey today. Ron, how you doing the day before big festivities?
Johnny, I'm doing well. I am a little bummed out that I missed last week's Four Feathers episode. So I'm happy to be back this week and talking with you, my friend. It feels good to be back before we are the penultimate day of October right now. Very, very excited for kind of the next chapter of the Blackhawks season, because it's kind of what November feels like when the calendar turns, and we're trying out something new today here. Johnny, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Looks like you got a little festive beverage going on there. I like it, Ron. You know me. I'm a huge fan of the Halloween holiday. So I'm excited to, watch horror movies leading up till 9:30 puck drop coming up on Halloween night when the Blackhawks will be in San Jose. Ron, I've been good. I think the Blackhawks have been playing better lately, despite just being 1-2 since Tony and I last talked here on this show last week. So we'll get into what has gone right, what's gone wrong, some questions surrounding the team, injury updates, and look at the preview for next week. Before we do any of that, make sure you subscribe over on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet. Give us a follow on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And as always, check out OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports literature and podcasting needs. All right, Ron, as I'd mentioned, 1-2 since we last talked, with a loss at home against Nashville. You got a 4-2 loss at Dallas, and then a 5-2 win got off the Schneid, broke his 4-game losing streak at Colorado Monday. Overall, general observations from this stretch of games.
Yeah, I think generally there's a lot of good things that the Blackhawks continue to put together. I think especially that Colorado game. I know, Johnny, thinking back over the last probably 2 seasons now under Luke Richardson, that early Colorado game is always on the schedule, and they always come out bad
either.
No, so seeing a little bit of a flip of that narrative was really appreciated on Monday night, especially how they got the job done with the bottom 6 contributing the way they did. And again, I think in general, I like that Luke Richardson's trying different shit. You have a brand new team, largely, especially in the forward group. Why not switch and play line blender and just see what works? Find guys that get hot together and then keep them together if they get hot. I think we've seen that consistently over the course of the season. I think we're starting to see it right now with 2 guys you and I very much appreciate, and I think we as a collective group appreciate at Four Feathers, clicking on the third line right now in Ryan Donato and Jason Dickinson. How are you now? I think you're starting to see some of that chemistry come together, and I think despite a 1-2 record, there's still a lot of good to be excited about with this Blackhawks team. Again, this is still a new team learning a lot of things. When you have these competitive teams that they're going up against, it's largely a lot of the same guys year in and year out during those competitive windows. Hawks are still finding their identity, and I think they're getting closer to doing so, Johnny.
Right. I'd mentioned it in my intro. They're playing better than that, what they did to begin that 4-game losing streak. And I know that the Nashville loss contributed and made it the 3-game, and then the Dallas loss 4-game. And you could take out the early portion of that Dallas game. They had to push back late in that one. But overall, I think you're right. It's settling in there. And Luke Richardson's having to do this around 2 big questions that surround the roster, and perhaps the answer is in Rockford, but they're not ready yet, and they might not be ready till next year. So it's a little bit of a tough spot for him to be in there when you're talking about how can they improve day to day right now. But overall, I like the way that they are trending. Let's say that, and hopefully the results come as we saw Monday in Colorado. Ron, I want to touch on that loss against Nashville on Friday. I really thought that was the game they were going to get off the Schneid. And early on, first period, they dominated. It looked like that sure as shit was going to be the game that, they were going to take over and, dominate. And the Predators were off to a tough start to the year, so you take advantage of that. But you get a goal reviewed for an offside that would have put them 3 up, gets called back, and then you allow Nashville fall asleep for just 5 minutes in the second period, and you get burned. Nashville ties it up, eventually goes up, and that game becomes a loss. And this is something that Tony and I introduced last week, Ron. It's the games they'll want backtracker. And unfortunately, this 3-2 loss on Friday against Nashville is now the 3rd installment in the games they'll want backtracker.
It definitely is, Johnny, especially when you're at home. I think that's the key piece of this 3-game stretch that we're really kind of analyzing here is that was your lone home game in this 3-game stretch that we are hyper-focusing on here. You want to win the games at home. And I think that's what was a little bit discouraging about that 4-game Schneid was all those games were at home for the most part, right? I mean, it was great to beat the Sharks in the home opener back on the 17th of October, but then you look at that, very brutal Buffalo loss, which is also on the games they'll want back tracker as well. And then you follow that up with a really sloppy game against Vancouver. And then this game as your end of the homestand with the loss to Nashville. I think that's discouraging. And I think that's why maybe that one really stands out even more than it potentially would. I think even if they had that loss and even with the win on Colorado on Monday, it feels better. But I agree with you, Johnny. When you have your foot on the gas and you can kill a team that's kind of going through the same battle the Hawks are right now, right? A lot of new faces in very important situations on that roster. Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea, all big-time players playing big-time roles on their new team. You want to be able to take care of those teams early in the season because once they gain their chemistry, they should play better given the pieces on the roster. I agree with you. That one absolutely deserving of a place on the list. And it's a good list right now. But again, how many of those did we probably have last year where you go, the Hawks should have had that one?
Right. Yeah. And now I think it's a little bit more justified this year because last year you could chalk it up to a lack of talent as weight of the world on Bedard's shoulders. And then Bedard was out. So there was like a stretch of a month that they couldn't even muster offense. So you couldn't even say it was a game that they'd want back because they couldn't do anything. But I really hope this list doesn't grow long this year, but we are going to keep track of it. So stay tuned with us here at Four Feathers as we build the games that want back tracker because, you always hear that cliche on the broadcast, especially for a save for a goal. That's one he'll want back. And then you can talk about it in analysis. I think Darren Pink said, it's a game they'll want back. Well, we're actually keeping track of it. So stay with us here at Four Feathers Pod. Ron, an interesting part about that, Alex Vlasic got the bump up to the power play quarterback one position in that one. We'll have a little bit more on that, but just noting some of the lineup maneuvering that's going on here. Saturday featured some more lineup maneuvering. Lucas Reichel got a start on the first line left wing alongside Connor Bedard. I know the minutes were just a little bit limited, but that was the nature of the game because Dallas was really taking it to the Hawks through the first two periods of this game. They didn't wake up in the second half of the back-to-back until the third period, Ron. It was a valiant effort to try and get back, and you got a nice Connor Bedard snipe off of a great Pat Maroon pass. That was exciting for a little bit there, but ultimately Dallas imposed their will on the Hawks on Saturday, and I'm not going to put this one in the games I want back because they deserve to lose this game.
Most definitely. There was no prayer of a chance against a team like Dallas. And unfortunately, a team like Dallas is likely going to take care of the Hawks more often than not, even in a season where wins are more important than they were a year ago. They're just a good team. And especially in their own building too, right? It'd be a little different if you were in the United Center and you have the second change, you can play the matchups you want to play against their forward lines. When they're rolling out guys like, Mason Marchment and Wyatt Johnston, and that doesn't even include their top dogs like Jason Robertson, and still have an effective Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn on the roster despite their age, that's just a deep, deep roster that, unfortunately, especially on the second half of a back-to-back, should have beat the Hawks, and they took care of business.
Yep. There were a couple positives, though, as I had mentioned, Bedard getting back on the score sheet. I also called that one. I saw that was going to happen. So that was good to see. But beyond that, they got a greasy goal down low. And that was something that I think Pat Maroon had talked about the importance of doing. And it was Ryan Donato and Craig Smith crashing the net. And it was, the ugly goal. It's not going to make the highlight reel. But I think that helped them in their approach to Monday's game against Colorado, where you got good early pressure and you got a pretty goal. Kurashev on the power play. That was pretty. That was Alex Vlasic setting that up. But then, you get Ryan Donato. He had 2 goals in this game, around 3 points overall. But his first one was jamming around the net. He's getting slashed and whacked and hacked. But he doesn't care. He puts his nose in there, gets the puck behind struggling Alexander Georgiev. Good to be able to take advantage of that. They weathered the storm then. They got up, 3-2 after the first period and were able to weather the storm through the second and third. It wasn't always pretty, very gritty, but a win is a win, and I think the boys will be feeling a lot better of that going into a lesser opponent coming up Thursday.
Johnny, not only was that a bar from yourself, but you're 100% correct. It's good to see them go on the road again, reiterating the challenge this Blackhawks team has had under Luke Richardson with that early. They always have an early Avs game. I don't know what it is about the NHL schedule makers, but they love sending the Hawks to Colorado.
You're right. It seems like
October.
it's always at Colorado.
It's always in Denver.
You're always going to have one, I think, a matchup,
Sure.
just because of the usually four matchups with the Central Division team. But yeah, it does feel like they're always on the road early in Denver.
Yeah, it's always early in Denver. And it was good to see them rewrite the narrative of what the last 2 years have been going to Denver early in the season. And again, I think that's the one difference that, Johnny, you mentioned, right? The things that we can take away from these 3 games that this Blackhawks team is improving. They are willing to play a little dirtier. And I don't mean dirtier in terms of beating the crap out of people and things like that, although we've seen Pat Maroon drop the gloves, in these last 3 games, but they're just getting to the dirty areas, right? This was a game where outside of Philip Kurashev, your top 6 was largely nullified by the Colorado Avalanche. It was the Jason Dickinson line. It was your new look Lucas Reichel led 4 line that was taking care of business against a good Avalanche team and taking maybe advantage of a little bit of, lack of depth and an injured Avalanche team early in the season now. But sometimes that's how you got to beat these teams. You're not always going to be able to go pound for pound with the big guns on everybody's roster. Sometimes you got to let your third and fourth line guys with better matchups take care of business. And that's exactly what the Blackhawks did in this game. And I think that's why Monday's game, Johnny, truly has me excited for the rest of the road trip, especially given the teams that are on the schedule coming up here. I think this was probably the harder part of the road trip was with Avs and Dallas before they go west. Very, 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 very excited with kind of just what's to come and hoping they can build on what they did Monday and take that into the next 3 games that we'll be previewing before the end of today's show.
Yep, absolutely, Ron. Other note just I had from that Colorado game, Luke Richardson shouted out post-game, but Jason Dickinson's checking line, excellent work against a high-octane Avalanche offense. We know Jason Dickinson's emergence, and obviously some of the points came last year. Contract extension came with it, but what he's best suited to do is shut down other teams' top lines, and for the most part, they did that. I know Cale Makar got on the highlight reel blowing past Seth Jones, and everybody's all mad online about that. But for the most part, in terms of 5-on-5 play, Jason Dickinson's line did its job, and that was a huge reason why the Hawks were able to get off the schneid and break this losing streak.
Yeah, and again, further highlighting the importance of Jason Dickinson and anybody that plays on his line right now, because more often than not, it is the guys with a little bit more defensive focus, right? We've seen a little bit of Ryan Donato on that line so far this season. We know Ilya Mikheyev is capable of playing that two-way game because of his speed, and that's why he's such an asset, I think, on Dickinson's left side. I kind of like this Donato connection now because you have a little bit of that offense from all 3 of those guys, while all 3 of them play that kind of hard-nosed, gritty game that you need to be an effective checking line in the NHL. And again, absolutely the reason that Jason Dickinson, I think, got the extension. The 22 goals last season were cool and tough. Don't get us twisted here, but it's what he does. I mean, this guy got Selke votes. He got Selke votes on like the worst team in the NHL. That says something about how good he was a year ago, that Jason Dickinson placed rather favorably. I mean, boy, he was top 15 in the NHL in Selke voting on a piss-poor Blackhawks team. Shout out to how are you now and just what he's putting together and what they continue to do over the course of the start of the season.
Yep, you mentioned one of his wingers, Ilya Mikheyev. Ron, he got his first Blackhawks point, and it was a goal, an empty netter, the final one at Colorado. So that was good. Sometimes they always talk about like a mental thing, like just like a breakthrough. I think that'll be good. Not saying that Ilya Mikheyev is going to put up points for you like crazy. He obviously his role is more on that third line, helping, the team escape the defensive zone and carry the puck out, all of that kind of stuff, the mundane stuff. But guess what? They don't ask how, they ask how many. And if we're asking how many, at least Ilya Mikheyev can say 1 now, because for the longest time, how long is he going to go without a point? So I just wanted to shout that out because he got his first goal in a Blackhawks sweater. So Ron, from these, we had mentioned some positives there, but there are 2 lingering question marks. And unfortunately, I don't know if the answers are, within reach here, but those question marks are second line center and the power play 1 quarterback unit. We've seen some shuffling on here. Obviously, Philip Kurashev started the season as a second line center. Well, they roll out Monday in Colorado, and Nick Foligno is there with Kurashev bumped up to play with Bedard. So I know some people will be excited about that. But then, Nick Foligno, good face-off guy, but is he really someone to drive it? Felt like that second line was the one Colorado was trying to expose the most. Luckily, they weren't able to too much. And then we can get into power play quarterback 1 after that. But thoughts on the 2C here? Because, I think they wanted Frank Nazar maybe step up and take it, but it's best for him to ripen in Rockford.
Yeah, and I think something to keep in mind here, because of how the AHL slate plays, they haven't played a lot of games yet. So I don't think we can even confidently say where Frank Nazar is in his development over the course of this season so far.
4 points through 5, though, I think.
which is awesome to see. I mean, he's putting up numbers, and he's playing the big minutes in Rockford, as he absolutely should. I think there's still a world where January, February, we very well could see Frank Nazar if he really is continuing to put up this kind of pace in the AHL and get an extended look, especially if the Blackhawks are well out of it and they're kind of just playing for, consolation prizes and silver linings at that point in the year. But that being said, I applaud Kyle Davidson for at least reportedly exploring the market. So for anybody that might have missed it, David Pagnotta, part of the fourth period, reported that the Blackhawks, among a couple other teams, I believe Calgary was one of the teams mentioned in there as well, are exploring the young center market. I think that's an incredibly important key. It's young centers, not necessarily veterans and aged, old players that they want to bring in here. The only problem with that for the Blackhawks is that's going to require either prospects, which Blackhawks certainly don't want to give up on some of these guys that they've highly targeted, right? Marek Vanacker, for example, obviously a guy like Frank Nazar, especially. But then in addition to that, you also really don't necessarily want to give up draft picks unless you are really confident in the player that you're bringing in. Now, you have 2 draft picks in the first round in this coming draft. I believe they also have 2 second rounders in this coming draft as well. So you have some upper draft capital that they certainly could exploit in a potential trade. Unfortunately, right now, you have to play with the game of who's really out of it that wants to trade young players away. To me, the only team that comes to mind is a team like Anaheim, who has a ton of young centers on the roster, right? They just drafted Leo Carlson at the top of the draft in the same class as Bedard. There's a lot of uncertainty around Trevor Zegras and his future role in Anaheim. Obviously, of course, they have guys like Troy Terry and some other guys, in the mix as well. To me, that's the only real option right now that's available. And absolutely, I would expect the Ducks to ask top dollar for a young player like Zegras, who has put up a 60-point campaign in the NHL on more than one occasion. I think it's good that Davidson continues to explore, and I think there's absolutely a world where he makes a strategic deal closer to the deadline if it really fits the narrative. But some of that might also just depend on where Frank Nazar is in his development as well, too. If he's ahead of the curve, maybe the Blackhawks find themselves kind of out of that. Whoa, we want a really good high-end young center. And maybe they're more saying, hey, we just want to add some more young depth to our team that we can kind of fill in some holes that they might inevitably kind of offload at the trade deadline. Maybe guys like Pat Maroon or Craig Smith that could go to a winning team. So I agree with you, Johnny. I think the answer is still in Rockford at the 2C spot, at least for the time being. But you got to find somebody there that can at least play consistently. They don't need to be an all-star. They don't need to be, on the all NHL list at the end of the year. But as long as they can just give you quality minutes. And like you said, I just don't think they have that guy there right now. Keep an eye on some of these, late round draft pick type trades. I could really see a world where maybe Kyle Davidson pulls off like a Sam Lafferty level trade, and you get that just type of player that can come in and give you just a competent 2C, and maybe you put him with some more skilled wingers that can potentially drive some offense from there. But they're really going to need to figure that position out if they want to turn a lot of these games, and we don't want that tracker to get too long. Like you said, Johnny, they really need to turn some of these games into wins.
Yep. I just had one note on that trade. So I know you're all over this. This is, your bread and butter, Ron, your GM, Ron. Of course, see it right in the description there. But I'll just say we are still in October. It's Halloween Eve. Let me reiterate that. So while, yes, you can make note of the Friedman and David Pagnotta reports, reminder that trades most likely aren't going down for a while. So while it's fun to think about in hypothetical situations, as of right now, I think just for the time being, talking about immediate next 3 games here, get through this road trip, Nick Foligno is probably your option at 2C there. So let's move on to the next question surrounding this roster, Ron, and that is the power play 1 quarterback. And like I said, they had tried Vlasic out there a little bit on Friday against Nashville, and he said he wasn't fully, satisfied with this game, and obviously he's still learning the ropes there a bit. But I think it was warranted, and it was at least good to get a look, because I was there the Tuesday game against Vancouver last Tuesday, and my gosh, Seth fumbled so many of them, and Vancouver had a plan for Bedard to shut him down, and it was rough. So I think it was warranted that they gave him a look, but they did go back to Seth then in Dallas and against Colorado. So once again, I think your answer is down in Rockford with Kevin Korchinski on this one, Ron. But for now, I guess you'd probably be a little more comfortable with Seth Jones. Your thoughts on the whole situation?
Yeah, I think just given what's on the roster, you probably are just more comfortable with a guy like Seth Jones. Just unfortunately, you sit around and you think about it, and you kind of just wonder, like, where do they go from here? Because I like the idea of Alex Vlasic getting a look. I think you're seeing some of his offensive games start to turn a corner so far this season. I think the play to Philip Kurashev in the aforementioned Avs game that we just talked about was a perfect example of that. Him being able to take a shot, get his own rebound, come around the back of the net, keep his head up and visually look at the ice, find that soft spot in the coverage for Kurashev and give him time to wind into one and just fucking crank it. And he did. I don't hate that idea, but Alex Vlasic's never been a guy that plays the power play. Like, I don't even think he probably did it much when he was in college at BU. That's not his game. And I think that's the unfortunate nature of some of the veterans that the Blackhawks brought in to play on the blue line. I don't think they're necessarily bad options by any means to have on a blue line, but they don't really have anybody outside of a Seth Jones to run a power play.
Right. And you're not putting TJ Brody up there. We all know that. He's been even at even strength, it's been a go there. But the other one that you're possibly looking at for maybe a second unit is Alec Martinez, and he's on injured reserve. So for the time being,
exactly.
Yeah, you're in a box.
And maybe there's a chance that you start giving guys, I will call them tryouts on that second unit for, the next 5-10 games maybe, and just see what happens. A guy I wouldn't be mad seeing get a chance is a guy like Wyatt Kaiser, who has a little bit of offensive upside. I don't think they just trust him enough out there by himself to be able to get back and be in the right position at all times. But he's the type of guy that he's probably the next highest offensive upside defenseman on the roster at this point in time.
I'd agree.
So something that they're going to have to keep an eye on. Honestly, too, I don't know if this is something that Kyle Davidson would do, but I believe Kevin Shattenkirk is still a free agent. And that would be the type of guy that you could just bring in on a vet minimum and suit him up as a 6D and say, hey, run the power play because that's what we need you to do right now.
You know what, Ron? I think it would take multiple injuries for beyond the Alec Martinez. Like, you would have to say set this out and that's, I think it would have to come to that. But I appreciate GM Ron at least looking into the market for us. That's
we're trying to see what's there. But I just to reiterate, Johnny, and add to kind of close out my thought, I agree with you. The long-term power play quarterback and maybe even your two power play quarterbacks are both currently youngsters that are playing in Rockford.
Yep. So we'll have to see. And I think it's good. Once again, I'm not saying that they need to call them up because they have an issue on power play one. No, it's good for Kevin Korchinski and Frank Nazar to ripen down in Rockford, but it does present a little bit of a dilemma for Luke Richardson and how to deploy it. And you're seeing him try different things early on in the season. So we just want to talk through that. Those two big questions facing the Blackhawks tactically right now. So let's move on. Roster notes, a name that I'd mentioned in that possible power play quarterback too. Alec Martinez, he is still on injured reserve. I know before the road trip, it was said that, Luke Richardson was certain that'll go on the road trip. Well, the way that these injuries happen and the nature of a return timeline, well, guess what? Neither him nor Laurent Brossoit will be joining the team on the road trip. As the possibility, it was mentioned as a possibility before, that's not happening. So we won't see him until the Blackhawks return home. So at least out for 3 more games. That's the latest on the Blackhawks injury report. Okay. CHSN fiasco. Ron, we spent way too much time mulling over this the last 3 episodes. I don't want to do it every week, but they did reach a deal with Fubo. I believe it was last Friday. So that if you have Fubo TV, it's now available there. It's an internet, TV streaming service based on sports. Xfinity standoff is still ongoing. That's status quo as of right now. So we'll provide any updates as they become available. Follow us on the socials at 4feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. But Ron, unless you have a comment on it, I really don't want to go into the CHSN stuff more. And if you want some commentary on that, please go back, listen to our last 2 episodes. We had extended segments on it, but I'd rather get to ruffle some feathers.
I got 2 quick comments, Johnny, and I will keep them brief, I promise. The first one, I think Fubo is an important one for CHSN because worth noting, as somebody here in the lone 4 Feathers Ranger that covers the Chicago Cubs, Fubo also one of the few carriers that also has marquee sports networks. So I think that's key for fans that do maybe are not going to use all the teams that CHSN covers. I think that's an important key for the Fubo one getting done. So good on CHSN getting the Fubo one done. I think that's fantastic for them long term. In addition to that, the Xfinity thing I think is interesting. And the only reason I want to add to this, what's worth noting for people that are uncertain of why Comcast and Xfinity and CHSN are having such a standoff, the report is that the parent company, which is based out of Tennessee, and we knew this was discussed in the announcement of CHSN as a network, that their broadcast parent is based out of Tennessee. It's a smaller market broadcast company. They have historically had issues, and Xfinity only wants to carry them on their top tier. So this is not just a CHSN thing. This is a parent network company problem for CHSN. So maybe you could kind of throw some shade at those in the business departments of the Bulls and the Blackhawks and the White Sox of saying, what the hell were you doing going with a broadcast partner who has historically had issues with Xfinity? But something to keep in mind here. So it's not just CHSN. This is a bigger deal between two larger companies that are involved. CHSN just happens to be stuck in the crosshairs right now because everybody wants their sports in Chicago, understandably so. So those are my two comments, Johnny, just things I wanted to add from, I think maybe haven't been totally discussed over the last couple of shows, but yeah, I agreed with you. I hope it ends sooner rather than later, but, and they announced the app. I think that's important. One team will cost you $20 a month. All three teams will be $30 a month. And they expect that to come around, I believe, around American Thanksgiving is the report out there. So the CHSN app is coming for those that are just itching and scratching and can't work with the antenna or don't have a network provider like yourself, Johnny, who already carries.
Just interesting on that app front, because before they had said, the app is essentially ready to roll out, but they didn't want to release it before the carriage deals were reached. All that. Stay tuned. We'll provide updates as they become available when stuff is more concrete. But those are valid points, Ryan. I'm glad you got to them. It's time to ruffle some feathers. So I think you're up. Go ahead and lead off for us.
Oh, Johnny, I've been waiting for this one. I had this one teed up for last week's show, and I just have more ammunition behind my statement. I think everybody needs to get off their high horse about the Lukas Reichel needing to be higher in the lineup. And here's why. It's not for a bad reason. I'm not saying he's a bad player and shouldn't be up there. But we've seen him try to work next to Connor Bedard, a not physical player who gets targeted very easily. It doesn't work for him. Lukas Reichel is in the best possible spot for him to develop right now on this Blackhawks roster. And here's why. This is not the fourth line of yesteryear, Johnny, where Reese Johnson and Mackenzie Etwisel are routinely trotted out there as your center and right winger. You have legitimate, established, respected wingers flanking a guy like Lukas Reichel.
And Pat Maroon thinks the game at a very high level.
He does. And this is why that's important. Everybody's, we need Lukas Reichel to develop. Lukas Reichel needs to develop. He needs more opportunity. He's getting opportunity, but he's getting opportunity with players that are going to make him better. I think the thing Lukas Reichel has struggled with most is grasping the speed of the NHL game. And I don't mean just the speed and physical, like stride for stride. He's a fast skater.
Fast. Yeah.
Absolutely. He's a fast skater. But it's the mental aspect and putting it all together. Who better to play him with than two guys that have like 25 years of combined experience in the NHL and multiple Stanley Cups? And on top of that, by playing with Pat Maroon, by playing with Craig Smith, responsible veterans who are always going to be in position, Lukas Reichel can be the driving engine of that line. He can't do that with Connor Bedard. He can't do that with Taylor Hall right now while he's trying to develop. This is the best possible spot for him on this team. And because he's going to get weaker matchups, just naturally being the fourth line, that's only going to benefit him and his confidence, something you and I sat here and routinely questioned last year if he had any left at the NHL level. At the end of the day, I'm ruffling feathers. Lukas Reichel's in the best spot possible on the fourth line, and if you don't like it, fucking at me on X, and I will tell you why. Because right now, we've seen the experiment everywhere else. He's getting the opportunity, and maybe most important, Johnny, he's actually getting the opportunity to play center. And that could be really good for him long-term and for the Blackhawks potentially, when just a season ago, they were hoping he was going to be their 2C of the future, which has been a huge problem on the team.
Yeah, and let's cut the crap with Luke Richardson hates Lukas Reichel and he's in the doghouse and all of that. He's been having glowing reviews of him and what he's been able to produce. And I think it's a result of what you had just mentioned, him being in the right spot to be able to showcase his skill set. Maybe, taking advantage of some weaker matchups in terms of getting fourth line and all of that. But you see, I mean, come on, he produced assists on the goals by Smith in the Buffalo game. And then against Nashville with that speed play, same thing. Craig Smith's going to crash the net for you. If anybody tries to get rough and tumble with you, guess what? Pat Maroon's going to come in and clock him. So there you go. And I think it's a perfect setup for you. I agree.
And in addition to that, Johnny, just look at the Colorado game the other night. Lukas Reichel gets credit for it. You know why? Because he and Craig Smith on the play, because they're probably keeping Lukas Reichel accountable for being in the proper position. Right place, right time. He gets some puck luck and he gets a goal out of it. Yep. And a huge one at that when you just had Colorado answer your game, game opening goal with their goal of their own. what better way to zap their momentum than a quick one like that on a dirty goal that just happens to be some bad puck luck for the Avs?
Yeah.
I love everything Lucas Reichel is doing, and I never thought I would say it, Johnny, when we were sitting here over the summer with the signings of Craig Smith and Pat Maroon, but those might be the two best possible line mates he could possibly have right now for his development.
That's just part of an early season and a whole training camp process, preseason going into early season games is finding that chemistry. There are bound to be more line tweaks and whatnot, but for right now, that's what's working. And guess what? You'd rather, I know that they wanted to give him a look on that first line, reward him a little bit, but it just didn't work out. And like you said, the play styles contrast with him and Bedard talking about that little stint against Dallas on Saturday night didn't work out. So guess what? You move him back down and he gets another goal when you do so against Colorado. So I think
And I was just to kind of cap this thought off. Maybe in 15 to 20 games, maybe Lucas Reichel does get that look as that 2C, Johnny, because maybe he plays well with a Taylor Hall who can show he can go into the corners and he's a wily veteran. And then you get a Bertuzzi who kind of feels a little bit like a Pat Maroon sometimes in terms of what he brings to the game. Maybe that type of game works out for Lucas Reichel a little later in the season. Right now, they're building his confidence. He's playing with smart players who are probably teaching him the game, practice in and practice out, and they're having chemistry. And right now, it's helping the Blackhawks stay in games because you have a matchup now with a fourth line that is effective. When was the last time, Johnny, the Chicago Blackhawks had an effective fourth line?
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a hot minute. So it's nice to see.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good start to ruffle some feathers here. Ron, in Ruffle Some Feathers, I am not ruffling anybody's feathers. My feathers were ruffled on Monday night by Wyatt Kaiser's 2 penalties, especially the first one. Blackhawks already shorthanded. You're in the zone. I know it's tough. You got to do stick battles and all of that, but you get your stick anywhere up on Nathan McKinnon, and they're going to call it like NFL refs call PI and roughing the passer for Patrick Mahomes. It's going to happen. Guess what? He's a superstar in the league. You got to know the situation, and guess what? Then McKinnon comes down the wing, burns Seth Jones. Everybody says, oh, Seth bad, yada, yada. Well, guess what? They were on a 2-man advantage because Wyatt Kaiser took an ill-advised penalty. That, and then the next one, as the Avs were trying to creep back into the game in the second period, I believe he had an interference penalty on his own entry there too. That one a little bit more incidental there, but at the same time, it ruffled my feathers at the time, and enough to the point I said Wyatt Kaiser should be excluded from the post-game celebration if they win. So that's how ruffled I was, Ron. I'm not trying to ruffle anybody's feathers. I'm just saying how Wyatt Kaiser made me feel on Monday. Once again, overall, I think Wyatt Kaiser's been okay this season. Nothing outstanding, nothing too bad, but you got to be more disciplined. And Luke Richardson talked about, and Derek King talked about it in the intermission. We got to cut down the penalties, got to stay out of the box, because that's just an easy way for a team to quick strike back. And especially when you're on the schneid, I just thought, man, could be the moment where it tumbles back on the Blackhawks and you extend that losing streak to 5 games instead of, getting off the schneid there. So Wyatt Kaiser had me worried for a few minutes on Monday night, but my feathers were ruffled and I settled down now, so I can leave it at
Johnny. I think my feathers are indirectly ruffled because of your feathers being ruffled, because then I have people hating on Seth Jones when they shouldn't be hating on him because he's trying to cover a potential play because Nathan McKinnon's an all-world player who can pass to the middle of the ice.
You got 3 defenders on the ice. 3 defenders.
Yeah.
What are you going to do?
So get off Seth Jones's back. Get on Wyatt Kaiser's back. He got to sit in the stall while everybody jumped around with the belt.
Yeah, right. I just got to say, it's not just him. Those are just the most recent examples. They do need to be more disciplined, though, because like I said, it's just such an easy way to let a team back into a game. And I understand the penalty kill has been pretty solid to start the year for the most part when you look at overall numbers, and especially the early games when they were really kind of putting the pressure on other teams. But now that some teams have settled into their power play units, they're going to have a little more cohesiveness, a little more film to be able to attack the Blackhawks penalty kill. So you just want to stay out of those situations if you can. I understand it's a physical game. Penalties are going to happen, but if you can avoid ones like that, getting your stick up on Nathan McKinnon already, let's try and avoid that. All right. That does it for Ruffle Some Feathers. Let's send out some positive vibes, Ron, and some stick taps here. You go ahead first. One of our favorites.
Johnny Eggs, absolutely. One of your and I's personal favorites. Big stick taps to a guy like Ryan Donato right now. I was hoping Ryan Donato was going to have this kind of season in year 2. Got off to a slow start in year 1 with the Blackhawks. I think a lot of it was just trying to find where he was meant to play in the lineup. On a good team, he's probably best suited in your bottom 6. On a bad team like he was last year with the Chicago Blackhawks, he got a lot of time in the top 6 and just didn't work out. Started the season on Bedard's left wing, didn't quite work out. Obviously, he was up there with Taylor Hall as well, or pardon me, the right side. and then kind of shuffled up and down the lineup, had some healthy scratches. We've already seen him be scratched a couple times this season, but he is doing everything that this Hawks team needs him to do. He's going to the dirty areas. He's helped setting up chances, and he's been a part of a very effective checking line. I think we all applauded what Joey Anderson did next to Jason Dickinson a season ago. I think we need to applaud just as hard, if not harder, for what Ryan Donato has been able to bring, because outside of just defensive responsibility and kind of that grit and the TWTW that we love to see on a proper third line, he's also bringing the offense. Ryan Donato leads the Chicago Blackhawks in goals, people. If you didn't realize that, go check the stat page. 5 goals in 8 games for Ryan Donato, 6 total points already. 6 and 8 is a really nice number for Ryan Donato. He's on one of the best contracts in the NHL, $2 million. You know, is he a guy that's probably got a future with the team? Unfortunately not, although I absolutely love him and would love to see him in a bottom 6. He's a guy that if he keeps up this kind of play could yield the Blackhawks a crazy return at the deadline if the Blackhawks so choose to move on from him rather than potentially re-upping him as they did with some of the guys that I think we all can confidently say a year ago we thought they were all going to get moved as well, in the likes of Jason Dickinson and Nick Foligno. So big step to Ryan Donato, 2 goals on Monday night, which you absolutely love to see, especially one that was an empty netter. Just for insult to injury, it also goes off of Cale Makar's ass, which makes it even funnier. And Ryan Donato leading the Chicago Blackhawks in goals, and he's been playing some really good friggin' hockey playing next to Jason Dickinson right now. So stick taps to him.
Yep. Worthy stick taps, Ron. I appreciate that. I always love me some Ryan Donato. He just, you need, they talked about the need to find some greasier goals. Guess what? He's been the driver of 2 of those. The one at Dallas, I know they lost that game, but I feel like that kind of set the mentality a little bit going forward. And guess what? He gets that one in Colorado on the turnaround, eventually held up as the game winner. So there you go. My stick tap goes to Philip Khrushchev because he gave us a just fucking crank it goal, Ron. A nice half tapper. I know you had mentioned you had really highlighted the play from Alex Vlasic and how he was able to get a shot, get the rebound behind the net, come along over to the right wing and feed it to Philip Khrushchev. But my gosh, Ron, my favorite type of goal in the NHL is a slap shot. A one-timer would be ideal, but with the way that he received it, being left-handed there, and he just wound up, cranked it, just crank it, got to break out the graphic. I love it. You hear the sound of the puck off the bar, and it was a power play tally, so that ups that percentage there. Everything looking good, and it's just a pretty play. That's a highlight reel play. I like when the Blackhawks are on my NHL Network highlight reel, Ron.
Yeah, and just to add on to that too, kudos to Philip Khrushchev, right? We highlighted, like you said, the Alex Vlasic aspect of the play, but him finding the soft spot in the defensive coverage, right? I mean, he's able to find that spot. I think Bedard ended up kind of crashing the net, so that dragged the defender with him, but wisely knowing where the space is going to open up because everybody's got their eyes on number 98. Finds it, Vlasic finds him, and like you said, there's nothing better than to just fucking crank it when it goes off the bar with the little ping, and you get to just celebrate even harder because we know the graphics coming as well. Things you love to see. And kudos to a guy who, remember, everybody was freaking out about Johnny. He's in the doghouse. Right. That's how you get out of the doghouse. Score on the power play and give your team a chance to win.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yep, exactly. All right, Ron, as we look forward, getting down to the end of this episode of Four Feathers here, as we always do, we take a look at what's on tap next. We'll preview the rest of the road trip. But before we do that, I think we need to revisit our Four Feathers predictions tracker. You were not on last episode, so you do not, no possibility for you to get a point. Couldn't make a prediction. Tony was on here. He said 1-2-0 versus Nashville, Dallas, and Colorado. That is spot on. Mr. Tony gets a point. I said 1-1-1, was trying to replicate yours from a couple episodes, Ron. No overtime, so I don't get a point. Tony gets it. He's got 2. He is now the leader. You have 1, and I am still with big goose egg. 0 points for me. So, all right, Tony's the leader in Four Feathers predictions tracker. Let's get to it for this upcoming trip, Ron. They'll close out this 5-game road trip with a little California swing, going to San Jose for a Halloween night matchup, 9:30 on CHSN. Saturday matinee game, kind of mid-afternoon at LA Kings, 3 p.m. on CHSN, and then Sunday night hockey, 7 p.m. against the Anaheim Ducks on CHSN as well. How do you see this shaking out?
Johnny, I'm going to go into my bag of tricks again here. The 1-1-1 felt really good. It really did. I had a hunch, and I got a good hunch about this one. They're playing good hockey. And to me, despite the slow start for the Colorado Avalanche, despite what happened in that Nashville game, I ultimately think the Blackhawks are playing the weaker end of their competition on this road trip. I'm going to be probably way more optimistic than just about anybody. at this point in the season. 2-0-1 is my prediction. I think they take care of business against San Jose. I think they take care of business against Anaheim. I think that LA game, just because the Kings are still a very talented roster and it's a weird start time for the Blackhawks, I think that's going to be a game where they kind of slug it out for the first two periods. There's absolutely a world where both teams have just enough offense in the third, but I think the better team prevails in overtime. So I'm going to go 2-0-1 for the Blackhawks on these last three games here in California.
Yeah, see, Ron, you already got a point, so you can go exotic with your predictions. I need to get back to basics. Pucks in deep, pucks on net. Get me a damn point here, and I will go with the most logical based on the strength of the opponents. The Blackhawks are going 2-1-0. They will win Halloween night in San Jose against an inferior team, even though San Jose is on a 2-game winning streak now. LA Kings are the better team. They're going to take care of business and beat the Blackhawks on Saturday afternoon. That's a loss. And then on Sunday at Anaheim to close the road trip, I believe the Blackhawks are the more organized team than the Anaheim Ducks. There's a lot of, I don't know, just bleh going on with Anaheim. They have some talented players. I know Leo Carlson.
Good word.
Whatever. There's some disarray that goes on in Anaheim. And
the Blackhawks have more structure.
Yes, the Blackhawks will play a better structured game and take care of that to go 2-1-0 to close this road trip. That's my prediction. So, Ron, I'm really looking forward to Halloween night. Like I said, watch some horror movies leading up to it with that late puck drop. And then who knows, maybe the game will be a horror movie because if you look at the NHL standings, these teams are towards the bottom of it, but we're sickos here, so we will be watching.
We sure will. And, there might have been a little bit of sprinkle from the NHL being like, well, how do we make sure the Halloween slate is quality? Well, we'll give them all the good games early. And then if you want to be really scared before you go to sleep, you sit around and you watch the 9:30 game between the Sharks and the Blackhawks in what is it still the SAP Center out there in San Jose? I don't even know anymore if it still is.
Yep.
That one's going to be a barn burner. Do we have a Macklin Celebrini return yet? Or are we Macklin Celebrini less? Okay.
Still week
to week. So largely the same team that you saw the Blackhawks beat 4-2 in the Hawks home opener. So I agree with you. I don't hate 2-1-0. But because I feel like I have a slight horseshoe up my ass when it comes to these overtime guesses, I got to ride with the 2-0-1.
Yep. Okay. All right. We will see how it shakes out next week. Like I said, I'm still looking to get on the board. Ron, you can tie Tony with a point if your predictions are correct. And Tony has to stay put since he was not on the show. So he does not get an entry, just like you did not get an entry last week for missing the show. That's the way it goes. That's how we do it here at Four Feathers. Tony's a healthy scratch today, as you were last week. So, Ron, as we close down here, it's Halloween Eve. I got to ask you, did you see the photo of the Blackhawks from their Halloween party? Some costumes there.
I have not yet. I have actually not been on socials much, so I need to dive into
So I'm biased because I loved this movie as a kid, but Connor Murphy wins the Blackhawks Halloween costume contest because he dressed up as Squints from The Sandlot. And it was spot on.
That's
had the jersey,
amazing.
with even his number, had number 5s on the sleeve, had the glasses, and just his look, it was perfect for it. Of course, his wife dressed up as Wendy Peppercorn, all of that. You get the whole shebang. And then honorable mention to Seth Jones, because I am also a fan of this, media, and that was Peaky Blinders was his theme. So Seth was looking dapper. I enjoyed that. Those would be my winners from that. You have any?
To talk about a former Blackhawk, did you see Marc-Andre Fleury's?
No. What do you do?
Oh my goodness. Now I got one for you to go see. He was McLovin and he absolutely nailed it perfectly, John. I mean, when I say perfectly, he had the haircut and everything, like the straight bangs across and the whole nine. It was phenomenal. I'll tell you what, you send me the Blackhawks team picture, I'll send you Marc-Andre Fleury and we can exchange and enjoy.
Yeah, sounds good. Rod, do you have any hockey Halloween related things as we are wrapping up here? Just festive final thoughts here. Mine was back in college for like 2 years in a row. I went as Brent Seabrook, and that was great. I love socks, put the tape around them and all of that. But it was a great, just get up because I already had the Seabrook jersey. Made sense. Black shorts, red socks. Put the tape on, make it look like the stripes on it. Perfect. That's my hockey Halloween little memories.
That's fantastic. No hockey Halloween memories. I do have a football Halloween memory. I went in one year as the full shebang, the high socks, the football pants. I didn't have shoulder pads, but we had a nice fitted jersey on it. It made a lot of sense. I will say, though, my go-to, because as GM Ron, I am a salary cap nerd. My go-to costume for probably 5 years of my life at sporadic times has been the go-to nerd costume. You get the taped glasses in the middle, you get the short tied tie that's about to here, the suspenders, you get the whole nine going, you fill it with the pocket presser. So, I was getting my PhD in salary cap geography, as Mr. Tony Marchese says, long before when it comes to Halloween. So no hockey ones yet though, Johnny. And it's funny enough, I am actually looking for a hockey related costume for this year. Yeah. I think my easy go-to is just going to be as a Seth Jones truther. I think that's what we're going to go as.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I like it, Ron. We appreciate everybody tuning in here on Halloween Eve. This was season 6, episode 6 of the Four Feathers podcast, Hawkey Halloween. We appreciate everybody jumping in. Make sure you don't miss us next time. Subscribe on YouTube at OnTap Sportsnet there. Give us a follow on the socials at Four Feathers Pod and at OnTap Sportsnet. And as always, check out OnTapSportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports, literature, and podcasting needs. Ron, always one of my favorite days of the year coming up. So I look forward to enjoying it, enjoying some Blackhawks hockey. And we will be in touch next week before the Blackhawks return home. Until next time, let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks, baby.